The House of Windsor, a name synonymous with power, tradition, and above all, scrutiny. For centuries, the British monarchy has captivated the world, its triumphs and tragedies playing out on a global stage. But behind the gilded gates of palaces and the carefully orchestrated public appearances lies a world of simmering rivalries, whispered conspiracies, and ruthless ambition. This is not a fairy tale. This is the story of a battle for the very soul of the monarchy, a conflict that pitted a devoted father against a woman determined to reshape the line of succession in her own image. Our story begins with Prince George, the young heir to the throne, a boy barely on the cusp of adolescence. 12 years old, with his father's fair hair and his mother's kind eyes, George carried the weight of 1,000 years of history on his small shoulders. He was the future, the hope for a modernized monarchy, a bridge between tradition and a rapidly changing world. But George's path to the throne was far from secure. Shadows lurked, and a storm was brewing within the palace walls. At the heart of this storm stood Camilla, the queen consort, a woman whose journey to the highest echelons of British society had been fraught with controversy. Once vilified as the other woman in the tragic saga of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, Camilla had weathered decades of public disapproval to finally claim her place beside the king. But had her ambition been sated, or was she quietly, methodically reaching for something more? Those who knew her well spoke of a steely resolve, a cunning intellect, and a deep-seated fear of being relegated to the sidelines once Charles's reign came to an end. The whispers began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Concerns about George's education, his preparedness for the role he was destined to play, suggestions that perhaps he was too young, too sensitive to shoulder the immense responsibility of the crown. These whispers, carefully planted and strategically amplified, found fertile ground within the palace corridors and the tabloid press. And at the center of it all, like a spider weaving its web, was Camilla. Then came the announcement. Prince George would be undergoing a period of special training, designed to prepare him for his future duties. The palace spun it as a loving gesture from King Charles, a way to connect with his grandson and impart his wisdom. But something felt off. The details were vague, the communication channels were unusually restricted, and George, normally a chatty and affectionate child, suddenly vanished from sight. For Prince William and Princess Catherine, this was a red flag. They trusted their son implicitly, and they had always been fiercely protective of his privacy and well-being. The sudden isolation, the lack of communication, the whispers of doubt surrounding George's capabilities, it all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple training program. Catherine in particular felt a deep unease, a primal fear that her son was being manipulated, isolated, and perhaps even harmed. She had seen Camilla's calculating gaze, felt the subtle chill in her polite pronouncements. She knew that beneath the veneer of royal duty, a dangerous game was being played. William, torn between his loyalty to his father and his unwavering devotion to his family, found himself caught in a web of intrigue and deception. He began to ask questions, to probe for information, but he was met with a wall of silence, a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep him at bay. The palace, once a symbol of unity and tradition, now felt like a battleground, and his own son was the pawn. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the monarchy to its core. The gilded cage of Wiltshire became George's world. His days were a relentless cycle of forced elocution, memorizing complex political jargon, and enduring the chilling presence of the ex-military coach. The simple joys of childhood, video games, football with his friends, bedtime stories with his mother, were distant memories. Instead, he was being molded into a miniature politician, a puppet whose strings were being pulled by a woman he barely knew, a woman who seemed to delight in his discomfort. Camilla's influence was insidious. She used George's loneliness against him, subtly poisoning his mind with doubts about his parents' love and his own worthiness. She presented herself as the only one who truly understood the demands of the crown, the only one who could prepare him for the challenges ahead. It was a classic manipulation tactic, isolating the victim and then offering herself as the savior. But William wasn't buying it. He saw the fear in George's eyes, the forced smiles, the carefully rehearsed pronouncements. He knew that his son was being subjected to a form of psychological torture, a systematic dismantling of his spirit, and he knew who was responsible. The breaking point came when Catherine discovered that her name had been removed from George's entourage for an upcoming international conference. The justification to encourage the young prince's independence was laughable. Catherine had always been George's rock, his quiet strength in the face of public scrutiny. To exclude her was a deliberate act, a calculated attempt to sever the bond between mother and son. That's when William decided to take action. He couldn't stand idly by while his son was being used as a pawn in Camilla's power game. He would confront her, expose her, and rescue George from her clutches. His arrival at Clarence's house was unexpected, to say the least. He stormed into the meeting room, his face flushed with anger, his voice booming like thunder. The carefully orchestrated scene of royal harmony shattered in an instant. The confrontation was brutal, a clash of wills fueled by years of resentment and suspicion. William accused Camilla of manipulating his son, of poisoning the monarchy, of trying to rewrite history. Camilla in turn accused William of being blinded by his mother's ghost, of failing to recognize the sacrifices she had made for the crown. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. Camilla genuinely believed that she was acting in the best interests of the monarchy, that George needed to be hardened, molded into a leader who could withstand the pressures of the modern world. But her methods were ruthless, her ambition unchecked, and her motives tainted by her own insecurities and past traumas. The showdown at Clarence's house was a turning point. It exposed the deep divisions within the royal family, the simmering tensions that had been carefully concealed for decades. It was a public declaration of war, a battle for the soul of the monarchy that would play out on the world stage. And at the center of it all was a young prince caught between his father's love and his step-grandmother's ambition, a boy who simply wanted to go home. William's rage was a tempest contained, but the rescue of George was only the first salvo. He knew Camilla wouldn't back down easily. Her ambition was a hydra, and chopping off one head only meant two more would sprout. The immediate priority was to heal George, to erase the damage inflicted by the isolation and the relentless pressure. He and Catherine poured all their energy into creating a safe haven, a bubble of love and normalcy within the palace walls. The international conference loomed, a minefield of potential pitfalls. William refused to let George be re-traumatized on a global stage. They painstakingly rebuilt his confidence, line by line, word by word, restoring the original speech, the one filled with a child's genuine concern for the planet. The final touch was Catherine's quiet strength, a silent promise that she would be there, always, a steady presence in the storm. The day arrived, a spectacle of flashing cameras and expectant faces. The auditorium felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation. When George walked onto the stage, he was visibly nervous, his small frame almost swallowed by the immensity of the moment. But then he saw his parents, their faces radiating pride and unwavering support. That was all he needed. He spoke from the heart, his voice clear and strong, his words resonating with honesty and passion. There was no political jargon, no forced pronouncements, just a simple plea for a better future. The crowd erupted, a wave of applause that washed over him, a validation of his spirit, a triumph over manipulation. But William knew this was only a temporary victory. Camilla was still out there, wounded and dangerous. The real battle was yet to come. He needed to expose her, to reveal the extent of her machinations, to ensure that she could never again wield such power within the monarchy. He convened the Royal High Council, a gathering of the most influential figures in the kingdom. This wasn't going to be a quiet, behind-the-scenes negotiation. William threw open the doors, inviting the media to witness the proceedings, to hold the monarchy accountable. It was a bold move, a calculated risk, but he was determined to drag the truth into the light. Camilla arrived, a mask of composure barely concealing her inner turmoil. She knew she was walking into a trap, but she refused to show weakness. She had spent too long fighting for her place in the royal family to surrender without a fight. William laid out his case, methodically and relentlessly. He presented evidence of Camilla's manipulation, her isolation of George, her attempts to undermine his position. He spoke of her past, of the pain she had inflicted on his mother, of the shadow she had cast over the monarchy for decades. Camilla countered, her voice dripping with indignation. She accused William of being driven by personal vendettas, of distorting the truth, of failing to appreciate her dedication to the crown. She painted herself as a loyal servant, a victim of circumstance, a scapegoat for the monarchy's problems. The council listened intently, their faces etched with concern. They knew that this was more than just a family squabble. It was a crisis of legitimacy, a threat to the very foundation of the monarchy. The fate of the crown hung in the balance. The deliberations were long and arduous, the tension in the room palpable. Outside, the world waited, breathlessly anticipating the outcome. Would the monarchy crumble under the weight of its own internal conflicts? Or would it emerge stronger, cleansed of its corruption? The palace held its breath. For 72 hours, the fate of the monarchy teetered, suspended between tradition and revolution. The modern world watched, obsessed, as the House of Windsor wrestled with its demons. Every hushed conversation, every leaked detail became fodder for speculation, analysis, and, let's be honest, delicious gossip. The verdict, when it finally came, was a carefully calibrated compromise. A royal tightrope walk designed to appease both sides while preventing the whole institution from collapsing. Camilla, publicly humiliated and stripped of her power, was effectively exiled. Her influence, once pervasive, was now reduced to a whisper. But let's be clear, this wasn't justice. It was damage control. The monarchy, ever pragmatic, chose survival over true accountability. Camila, despite her transgressions, remained a member of the family, shielded by the institution she had so desperately tried to control. The old guard, clinging to tradition, simply couldn't stomach a complete and utter downfall. The public, however, wasn't buying it. The apology felt hollow, the punishment insufficient. The ghost of Diana, forever haunting the House of Windsor, seemed to demand more. The social media storm raged on, fueled by years of pent-up resentment and a deep-seated distrust of the woman who had once been the most hated in Britain. William, despite securing a victory for his son, couldn't shake the feeling that he had only won a battle, not the war. He knew that Camilla, though wounded, was far from defeated. Her ambition, like a dormant volcano, could erupt at any moment. He had to remain vigilant to protect his family from any future threats. The king, weakened by illness, remained a distant figure in the drama. He had chosen Camilla, stood by her through thick and thin, and now he was forced to watch her disgrace. The situation, no doubt, took a toll on his already fragile health. The crown, once a symbol of strength and stability, now felt heavy, burdensome. In the aftermath, Kensington Palace became a sanctuary, a refuge from the storm. George, slowly but surely, began to heal. The trauma of his isolation, the manipulation he had endured, left scars, but the love and support of his parents proved to be a powerful balm. He found his voice again, his confidence restored. He continued to champion environmental causes, speaking with passion and conviction. He became a symbol of hope for a new generation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, sincerity and authenticity can prevail. William, forever changed by the experience, doubled down on his commitment to modernizing the monarchy. He began to implement reforms, streamlining the institution, promoting transparency, and redefining the roles of secondary royals. He was determined to create a more inclusive, more relevant monarchy, one that could better serve the needs of the British people. But the shadows lingered. The knowledge that power and ambition could corrupt even the most venerable institutions remained a constant reminder of the fragility of the crown. The House of Windsor, forever bound by tradition, would continue to grapple with its past, its present, and its uncertain future. And Camilla? She retreated into the shadows, licking her wounds, plotting her next move. The game, after all, was far from over. The monarchy, like a chessboard, was set for another round, another battle for control, another dance with destiny. The crown may shine, but the darkness, as always, lurked just beneath the surface.